Welcome to the Business of Apparel podcast. This is the place to learn how to start and scale your own apparel brand and fill it with loyal customers for years to come. I'm your host, Rachel Erickson, owner and CEO of Unmarked Street, and I can't wait to share this episode with you. Welcome back to the Business of Apparel podcast, where this week we're going to get a little bit into some corporate talk. So I'm going to put back on my old corporate managerial hat, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about office politics and dealing with HR. Now, inevitably, if you are working in a corporate office of any kind, especially an apparel corporate office, there are always going to be some office politics at play. I mean, this kind of happens in corporate across the board. This is part of essentially the game that we have to learn how to play as corporate employees. We are employees of someone else's company. And so it's important for us to be able to keep our jobs and to get raises and promotions, to continue providing value and continue kind of proving our worth to those who get to make those decisions, who deem you worthy or deem you able to get raises and promotions. I'm not quite sure how to politically say that correctly. It is important as a corporate employee to make sure that you are a little bit at least playing that game. And I know that that can be frustrating, right? Like a lot of us want to be able to go to work, do a good job, go home at the end of the day and feel like you checked off a list, feel like you contributed, and you don't always want to be part of the office politics. And I would say definitely at the beginning of a lot of our careers when we start in corporate, we're not even kind of aware that these corporate politics are happening. And, maybe the generation now is a little bit more aware because it's out there so much. There's so much talk about it. And there's a lot of nuance that happens behind the scenes that I think they're getting exposure to, that someone like me, 15 years ago, 17 years ago, 20 years ago, when I started my career, even as an intern, it was just not as obvious. And so it was probably happening at the upper levels of the companies that I was working at, but it just wasn't something that I was interested in being a part of. And it wasn't something that was kind of thrown in my face all the time through the news and the media. So it was something that I was kind of able to divest from until I got to a certain point in my career where I needed to be able to understand how to play the game so that I could up-level my role, so that I could step into managerial positions, and so that I could lead my team from a place of them not needing to deal with the office politics, right? Like a good manager will kind of take that off of their team's plate. And so it was important for me to learn how to deal with a lot of that on my own so that my team didn't have to. And I think one of the things that I really learned as I was stepping into some of these roles and really getting to understand how office politics works, there are a couple of key things that you can be doing to make sure that you are setting yourself like heads above the rest. Number one that I always noticed, which is why we're trying to do so much free education here at Unmarked Street and the Business of Apparel, one thing I noticed is that every time I put myself in a place of continued education or higher learning in some way, I was really, really recognized and acknowledged for that, especially in our industry where there is no demand for continued education. I mean, and when I say demand, I don't mean like people don't want it. I mean, the industry isn't demanding that you go do it, right? Like we don't have a certification or we don't have some sort of degree that requires us to continue going out and learning more year after year. Like doctors and nurses and real estate agents. And there are so many other different kinds of professions where in order to hold their certification or to hold their license, they have to continue going out year after year and getting hours of continued education. My PMP, my project management professional certification, I have to go out every 3 years and make sure that I get enough hours of continued learning to make sure that I can keep that certification. And so I go through classes or I'll take some online courses to make sure that I'm learning what's new and modern and still going on in the project management space. Number one, it makes me more relevant to my clients to continue doing that. And number two, it makes sure that the PMI, the Project Management Institute, who gave me my PMP certification, it lets them know that I'm, number one, interested in keeping my certification. And number two, keeping up with the times on their books as well. And so it makes me a more relevant project manager. But there is not a demand for that in the fashion and apparel industry. So it's up to us to kind of figure out how we're continuing to learn in our roles. And I've seen this be a detriment to so many different people because without that push and having to motivate themselves to continue learning on the job or continue reaching out to some other source to figure out how to learn other aspects of our industry, it can fall to the wayside. And I would say of my graduating class, I was a fashion design student. I have a bachelor's of science in the arts. And the reason that I have a bachelor of science in the arts is because of how much on the job training I had to have when I graduated. It wasn't just art school. It wasn't just fashion design school. There was mandatory internship experience that we had to have. And so there was a science aspect of it because there was real world application that we had to have. And so of all of us who got this higher degree in the world of fashion design, I see probably half or less of those people still in the apparel industry because I think it washes people out really fast because there's no easy stepping stone. Like there's no guide as to how you can constantly be learning more, how you can constantly be pushing yourself forward. There's no push from the industry. There's no push from the corporations to make sure that we are learning more and more so that we get better in our roles, we get better in the industry. And so I think that that is something that can always set you above and beyond the rest. So if you're in a corporate role and you're trying to figure out how to play the game a little bit, how to get that raise or get that promotion, one thing that I always found, and again, this I can't say that this is going to work for everybody, but this was a consistent thing for me throughout my 15-year corporate career, was to go figure out how I could learn something new. So when I signed up to go to Stanford's continuing adult education classes on project management, and then decided to take that into learning all that I needed to learn to take the exam and become a certified project manager, there was all of a sudden a lot of interest behind what I was doing. I got the raise and promotion that I'd been asking for 2 years. And all of a sudden I was allowed to take on a managerial role and hire a couple of people under me. This has happened in a couple other instances too, where, I really wanted to go to different seminars or I wanted to go to different trade shows and attend the education days that were there. And all of a sudden there was kind of this bump up of what I was doing in my career. I was able to take on bigger projects. People were asking me to do different things. I was able to go to those sessions and learn a lot more about what was going on in the industry. And then my company rewarded me for doing that by giving me more responsibility and recognizing that that was going above and beyond. So if you're interested in doing something like that, there are several resources out there for you. I would be happy to talk to you about what the Business of Apparel online course could potentially do for you in your career. There is some information that is in our course that cannot be found really anywhere else unless you're planning on spending the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years of your own career figuring out how to learn it. I went through that. And so I put it all in a course so that you could learn it in a few months instead of having to learn it in a couple decades. So that is one route that you can take. I'm not trying to sell you or pitch you here. I'm just trying to say that this is a resource that I saw as a hole in the market, because it was something that I would have wanted and needed when I was in my career trying to figure out how to learn more so that I could play the game and play those office politics a little bit better. The next thing that I want to definitely suggest when it comes to office politics is a really tough pill to swallow. And I had to learn this later on in my career. First of all, I used to be a little bit of a hothead. I have always been really ambitious in my career. There are times where I have flown a little bit off the handle and been really ashamed of myself. My team has been really ashamed of me. I've had managers come to me and say, I hope I never see you do that again. For example, we were in a meeting one time and I was so frustrated with everything that was happening because it wasn't following our process that I got up and left the meeting. And that is so inappropriate. Don't do things like that. Oh my goodness. And it set me up for a situation where I needed to be able to apologize to people, like IRL, face to face, look me in the eye and say that I'm sorry for being a dick. I was an asshole in that meeting, or I totally disrespected you, and I understand why you think I'm a total bitch because I acted completely inappropriately. And so something that I had to really learn how to do as I was figuring out the back end of why I was a little bit of a hothead, I started going to therapy. I started kind of figuring out my own mental game. And as those pieces started to kind of come together, I really had to be able to step up and swallow that pill and be a little bit humble and be able to go to people and say, you know what, I know I've broken this relationship. This is on me. I set a really bad example for the team. I want to do better. I'm thinking of one person in particular who continued to be really, really vocal about how much they thought I was not a good member of the team. They were starting to report me to HR and to my manager on a regular basis. They just thought that my tone after that instance, they had a hard time getting that tone out of their head. So it didn't matter what I did, even if I ran meetings differently or had like a completely like fun meeting, or we were trying to do something really jovial. Like he just had it in his head that I was always going to be like that. And so we started to have weekly one-on-ones, and I ate a lot of humble pie going into a lot of those meetings where he point blank told me all the things that he thought I was doing wrong and why he thought I was not a good person. And I had to be able to sit there and take that. And that was really, really tough, but it was another way of me playing that kind of corporate political game because I needed to be able to have people like that on my side when I was going for a raise or going for a promotion, or to be honest with you, if I didn't want to get fired. I was working at a company that was very layoff happy. We had layoffs all the time, and I didn't want to risk losing my job. And so I had to be able to step into a role that I was very unfamiliar with and be really comfortable getting people in my face to tell me like point blank what it was that I needed to improve about myself, about my personality, about my leadership style, and kind of elevate myself as a corporate leader by being able to show that kind of humility. So if you've been at work and maybe you've ruffled a couple of feathers in a couple different ways, you know, there are always people that we don't always get along with for one reason or another. If you have that situation, I would really recommend that you take a big, deep, brave breath and figure out how to connect with that person on a more personal level, figure out how to help that person see a different side of you while actively making change in the way that you interact with them and with your team. And so that's the big key too, right? Like I had already started therapy. I had started some career coaching. I was trying to figure out how to be a better leader while eating the humble pie all of the time. And so that is another way to definitely kind of put yourself out there and really prove to people that you're willing to do the really hard things, right? Like you're willing to go learn more on your own. You're willing to really like put yourself out into an awkward situation and let people tell you what they really think about you. These are the kinds of brave things that managers and corporations are really are looking for, I think, in people. And so if there are opportunities for you to learn, number one, I really recommend that you go to your HR department or your benefits department. Ask them if they have a tuition reimbursement clause in your benefits. So a lot of companies have a tuition reimbursement option, and most people don't know about it. So when I went to get my PMP certification and I wanted to go take those Stanford classes, I actually found out that my company would totally reimburse me for all of those fees. So my classes, my exam, all of my online courses to prep for the exam, all of that was actually paid for by my company because of their tuition reimbursement benefit. So you could find that buying an online course or going to extra seminars or going to the trade show, your company might 100% pay for that, so it doesn't come out of your pocket at all. And then it also gives you that bump of like playing that political game and hopefully getting raises and promotions because of it. Are you frustrated by feeling like an outsider in your own industry? You're not alone. I spent years feeling the same way. Are you tired of endless research and you can only learn this stuff by getting a job in fashion advice? Me too. That's why I created the Business of Apparel online course. My years of insider knowledge condensed into video tutorials, demos, and downloads. Learn at your own pace, no fluff. Just key topics like building target profiles and mastering financials. This information is genuinely unavailable anywhere else. Grow your brand, become an apparel industry aficionado, and unlock millions in potential revenue. The value? Over $50,000 with millions potential for your brand. Don't miss out. Sign up for the Business of Apparel online course today at thebusinessofapparel.com/course. So that's kind of the office politics side. As I kind of talk a little bit about, being able to eat that humble pie, I keep saying, and talking to people and kind of keeping yourself out of HR, there is a flip side to that coin. And I want to talk about that a little bit today too, because sometimes there are people who there's not a misinterpretation of how they're reacting or how they're behaving, and you might be clashing with them. Maybe it's not because of something that you've done, but it's because of their toxic work culture. And so I just want to give a little bit of advice too. If you are encountering someone who you are not getting along with at work, and you're maybe reaching out, trying to be really brave, really courageous, and trying to get along with them a little bit better. Maybe you've set up some one-on-ones with them and you're trying to learn more about them. You're trying to humanize each other, right? Like you want to get to know each other in a way that allows you to see each other as people, not just heads in a room or heads on a Zoom screen. You definitely, in some cases, will find that people aren't receptive to those kinds of things. They can actually be even more abrasive in those kinds of situations. And these are the kinds of instances where it's important for you to start recording everything that's happening. So if someone is being extremely rude to you or is saying inappropriate things to you, and you feel that in the future, this is going to continue being a major issue and you may need to report it to HR, I really recommend that you start doing your best to record everything that you can. So if something comes to you in an email, you either want to save that email in an offline hard drive that is not on your company's server to have proof of what they actually wrote to you. You can also copy and paste that into a personal document. You can print them out. Another thing that you probably want to do if someone verbally says something to you, you can start a journal and start writing down the words that they said. That one's a little bit harder because it's going to be your word against theirs. But if you keep an entire journal of things that are being said to you by this person and it starts to really add up, that can be something that can be of good use to you. There are definitely plenty of other places, like if your company uses Slack or if they allow you to be texting each other. Those are the types of things that you can also keep. You can take screen grabs. The only reason that I bring this up is because there have been situations where I've seen other people in. I've been a part of one particular situation, which was really tough, where there wasn't enough documentation to kind of prove that the issues were real. And if you don't have all of the right documentation, especially in like the political game that we keep talking about and in the legal state of corporate today, it can be really hard to prove your side of anything. And if it gets to a point where it is extremely, truly inappropriate and uncomfortable, and this person needs to be let go because they're creating such a toxic and potentially harassment-like workplace, you are going to need as much documentation as you possibly can have to be able to prove all of that. So that's kind of the icky side of everything. I mean, you really hope that it never goes that way. But if you're starting to notice a pattern of something, that is definitely one thing that I can recommend you start doing, because you want to make sure that you can protect yourself and you don't want to have to be the person to quit their job because of a toxic situation if you can prove that the other person is actually causing a lot of turmoil. So I've seen it both ways. I've seen it where people did have great, amazing documentation. I've seen it where people had so much documentation and so much proof that they were able to sue companies. I've also seen the flip side of the coin where people get so harassed that they end up feeling like they have to leave the company. And so they're the ones who end up losing their job because of it. And that is really not fun. Corporate politics that unfortunately a lot of us do have to deal with throughout our careers. And so I just wanted to give a little bit of advice there. Definitely make sure that you have all of your proof. You're going to need a lot of evidence if you ever want to take somebody to HR because it's not working out and the situation is genuinely an issue. Now you can't just do it because you don't like somebody or you guys just don't vibe. Like it really needs to be like a sexual harassment situation, or it needs to be something of that kind of caliber to be able to really report it to HR and get anything done. You can always report it to their manager as well and just let them know that this is an issue and see if maybe it can start there and maybe the manager can just talk to that person. It takes a lot of courage, again, to be able to talk to them yourself and let them know that you're uncomfortable, but that is also usually the right place to start, because if that initial conversation is going to break down their walls and break down their barriers, that is always the best way to go. And I know that's tough to hear, especially for a lot of us introverts who don't want to have these awkward conversations. But I had a lot of great managers who, when I was having conflict with people sometimes in my career, the first thing that they would ask me is, well, have you talked to them about it? And it really pushed me to have to learn that that was the right first step every single time. So if you are out there holding down your corporate job and you're kind of running into some of this stuff, let me know. I would love to answer any specific questions for you. You can always send me a DM or you can comment below this video on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, we would love to hear from you. If this episode was helpful to you in any way, we would love for you to leave us a review. It means the world to us, the reviews that we're getting. And we will see you next week. Thanks for joining me today. Thank you so much for listening to the Business of Apparel podcast. I would so appreciate hearing your thoughts on the show. And if you know someone who could benefit from it, please share it with them. My biggest desire is to help other apparel professionals understand the nuances of our industry so we can all work toward making better product for a better world. If you would like to connect further, I'd love to invite you to send me a message through my website, thebusinessofapparel.com, where I do weekly trainings through my YouTube video channel, a weekly newsletter, blog articles, and so many more resources to help you start and scale a profitable apparel brand. This podcast is produced by Box 7 Media, who I cannot speak highly enough of. If you're looking to start your own podcast, you can reach out to Jeremy at Box 7 Media on LinkedIn anytime.